Welcome to Sponsored Post Podcast, behind the lens of how influential content is made. I am Justin Moore. I am the founder and CEO of Trending Family, which is an influencer marketing agency that launches campaigns with family-friendly influencers. Today, I am so excited to be joined by Andrew Schwalb, who is the U.S. Vice President of Influencer Relations and Business Affairs for DJE Holdings, which is the parent company of PR behemoth Edelman, United Entertainment Group, Edible, and more. He has extensive experience with talent and influencer strategy and brand partnerships. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Justin. Really happy to be on the show with you.
Absolutely. So we've known each other a little while now, and we've been in this space for a long time. And I'm just kind of curious to hear your background and story. Like, how did you first start working with influencers? I know you had experience at the audience and at in-house. And so I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, of course. It kind of even goes before then. When I was in high school, I was booking EDM artists and bringing them to nightclubs. And what ended up happening was I kind of got a true view into the deal points and the contracts and getting talent on site to make sure that they were, fulfilling their contract and everything was happening. And I think from there, it wasn't quite what we call influencer marketing yet. Of course, it wasn't really around in the digital form, but it was an intro into knowing that want to hire creators and storytellers, have them perform and kind of move on and do it again. And so eventually I moved to Los Angeles and I started seeing this brand that had a lot of press behind it and had a lot of backing behind it. And I was very interested in the way that they were tackling marketing from a different lens at the time. And that was about 2012, 2013. And they were pairing celebrities with brands and activating campaigns in digital and making these things called culture jams, where essentially we'd hijack moments in culture and pair them up with celebrity talent at the time and post in digital. And initially the goal was to program content on celebrity social media pages to eventually end up making them media values to bring in partnerships. As you can imagine, some of the most top tier celebrities, they don't take campaigns for, under 7 figures per se. And so we noticed very quickly after that there is a different kind of level of partnerships that were needed. Your YouTubers at the time, there were mommy bloggers that were ready and willing to partner with brands and turns out being a lot better content creators on their own. And so fast forward to where I am today, where we're still doing these digital campaigns, but they're a lot more holistically focused. There's many more touch points. We do a blend of celebrities, micro-influencers, experts, and we do all sorts of things, events, paid media, earned media, all that fun stuff.
Interesting. And so you talked a little bit about celebrity, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts on how does influencer marketing differ with celebrity talent versus, let's say, like a digital first creator? Like, are negotiations more difficult or easier since celebrities have dedicated agents and managers? Or kind of talk me through where you see the industry moving with respect to the difference between those two types of creators.
Yeah, of course. And I think it really boils down to KPIs for our clients. We have the capability to go and hire a top tier celebrity. We have the capability to do a full on nano micro influencer program if you want to. And I think from there, we try to do blended strategies. Obviously, if you hire a celebrity talent, you have that almost global massive awareness reach. Whereas, let's say regionally with this same client, we want to drive in-store traffic. We would probably hire more of the micro influencers in those specific regions to make sure that they're generating that local interest as well. And that just increases the ability for the massive awareness and then also the in-store traffic. But to get back to your question, the biggest difference we see when hiring celebrities is really the quality of the creative if no production team is involved. So, if we're going to hire a celebrity talent and we ask them to shoot content on their own, typically I would tell you it may not be as good as a digital first creator. Typically because most digital first creators, they started and made a name for themselves based off of storytelling ability and their specific niche and their ability to make content. And that's kind of their strong suit behind it. It's a little bit different when we have a production budget. Each side has its own weight as far as what works best for our clients. And again, it really boils back to just the KPIs of our clients. But I would definitely say that the business side of a deal with celebrities is way more complex. And this is really attributed to, you have a lot more entertainment attorneys with celebrity talent. You can have more SAG implications. You have commercial talent agents, you have managers. There's larger teams behind it. And as you can imagine, the more people that are involved, the longer things can take, the more complex it is. But again, we rise up to that challenge based off the needs of our clients. And so we absolutely can do those things. But I would pretty much tell you that most digital first creators, a lot of them now have agents and managers, but it's just not to the level of a larger celebrity team. And I think that actually works better in the long run.
It seems as though traditional celebrities in general are just more careful with who they let leverage their name and likeness.
I would agree.
And I think digital first creators tend to not be as concerned with that.
Right.
Especially full-time creators, like this is what they do for business, right? They do brand partnerships, and other traditional talent, they may be on a TV show or an actor, film actor or something. And so they have other sources of revenue. And so perhaps that may be a factor. I'm kind of curious, like we have seen like a lot of traditional celebrities kind of doubling down on their digital strategy, right? With creating YouTube channels or things like that. And so do you think there's been kind of an increase or a decrease in brands' desire to work with digital first creators as a result, now that they have access to digital platforms from these other traditional talent?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that anything newer is going to gather that interest up front. But I still would say it's more lucrative for digital first creators. Not to say, again, that the scale would tip towards a celebrity that's doing more digital content, but it's one of those things too that, Edelman does a trust survey, and it's interesting what we find out that people in general, they end up taking more action based on a person who is giving them a message that's like them versus a celebrity. So someone that's like you're going to listen to. And I mean, that's kind of common sense. If you're listening to a celebrity, they're not exactly like you. And so we tie this back because experts and peers show authenticity through knowledgeable, relatable, and inspirational content. And the digital first creators typically hit those three categories of having knowledgeable content, relatable content, and it's inspirational. And that's not to say that celebrities don't do that, but it's just a little bit different ballgame when you see where the strengths are on both sides. But it'll be interesting to see if the fact that celebrities who are creating more of this digital content, if brands will want them more, but time will tell.
One of the things I wanted to dig in a little bit to, because this is a specialty of yours, I think, which is talking about contracting, because I think we have definitely seen contracting evolve quite a bit over the years. But I kind of wanted to talk about some of the major factors that seem to be driving pricing for influencers. Especially what I'm curious about is like, are you seeing more protracted partnerships where it's like an influencer is posting like, multiple times over 6 months? Or is it like you're still seeing these kind of like one-off, like seasonal campaigns? Like, okay, I'm just going to do like one in-feed Instagram post and one set of stories, or like, what are you seeing?
So we're still getting one-off campaigns. I mean, I don't think those will ever go away. And we welcome them because typically what we end up being able to show our clients is when we're done with these one-off campaigns, we're able to show them what we could do if we extended that out, let's call it another 6 months or another 3 months, what we could have done with more posts, more talent. But another thing we're starting to see is we have clients who are asking for essentially what would be a retainer. So to say for 1 year, I want to put an influencer on a retainer, and we're going to hit a minimum of this many amount of events that we want them to come to, this many amount of posts per month or per quarter, this many amount of video. And it may start going that direction where instead of identifying per each individual campaign, it's more hiring an ambassador, hiring somebody that just continues to tell that story over time. And we don't have to enter into a new deal. We don't have to have new paperwork, more lawyers involved. It's a more turnkey process that we can engage based off of that year-long contract, of course, versus just a one-off. So we're seeing that happen in our SOWs. Again, still seeing the one-off campaigns, but I think it's something where it really also depends on the KPIs of our clients, which you touched on. So we will carve out a deal in order to meet anything that our client needs.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about exclusivity these days? Like, what do you think is standard? What are your clients most comfortable with roughly these days?
The pricing that we're getting back from talent influencers with exclusivity is coming to us more and more aggressively than it used to be. But, when we go out and we're setting the expectations on the program with our client, if we're going to post, let's say in 1 month, it typically makes sense for us to be at least half a month or a month before the month during the post and then a month after. So you would call it about 2 to 3 months. And it makes sense with the life cycle with content. By the time influencers post and their feed goes down, like those posts will eventually get off, fans will not see them anymore. And so we typically rely on about a 2 to 3 month for a smaller campaign, but it really just depends on the industry. If you've done beauty work before, you know that getting anything more than 2 or 3 weeks could be thousands and thousands of dollars. It really, again, points back to what our clients' KPIs are, what is that industry and how competitive it is. But we certainly want to be fair. I think at the end of the day, we just want to be fair. And some people, unfortunately, don't view it that way. But exclusivity is a funny topic because there's full category exclusivity. It's digital only. Is it barred from organic posts? So some people will say, oh, well, I'll be exclusive only for sponsored posts in that category. And then they'll go and post organically with a direct competitor, non-sponsored, and ask that be okay. So exclusivity has evolved a lot, I think would be my clear answer on that, where we're just trying to ensure that we are protecting our clients. Like at the end of the day, if we want to engage somebody with a partnership and tell the story of our client, we really need to make sure that creator understands you can't be working with another one of our clients.
One question I have, and this is something that's come up for us in the past, especially because we work with a lot of family creators. A lot of these creators are filming their day-to-day life, right? And especially if they have partnerships that exclude them from working with everyday retailers, for example, let's say Target or Walmart or something like that. Have you had situations like that where a creator has inadvertently included a competitor in a video, like, in like a little clippet of a video on YouTube or something like that, where it wasn't like malicious necessarily, but it was a violation of their competitive exclusivity? So like, how do you talk to your clients about situations like that?
Yeah, great question. What we usually try to do first is we will go and talk to the creator and really try to understand the story. And like you said, whether it be malicious or not, we really need to understand the intention there, just really understanding the landscape first. And then typically we will go directly to our client and flag them with what happened. And mostly depending on the type of exclusivity. And like I was saying, there's many different types that we're negotiating these days. If it's full category exclusivity and we've paid for that, then a lot of times we will instruct that they should take it down. And if it goes to different levels of impacting our partnership, there's different conversations that happen after that. But it's really just understanding the intent, understanding where we are with the current exclusivity we have. To bring up kind of one thing I was speaking on earlier, if we're not saying that they're barred from posting organically and it happened to be in a video, then we may not have much room to do anything. So it really just depends on what's in that paperwork.
Yeah, it can definitely be some of those conversations are challenging.
Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about term and usage. We talked a little bit about this, about how brands are wanting to kind of repurpose influencers' assets, whether it's for paid media or just reposting it, resharing it on their social channels, or maybe even embedding it on their owned and operated sites. What are you seeing right now? Like, is there still a big appetite for brands to get more mileage out of those influencer partnerships?
Yes and no. We're definitely seeing more of a license-based kind of usage rights, like clients not necessarily needing to outright own those assets. So mostly just repurpose that content. But to your point, clients want to use it potentially on a landing page. They want to use it in paid media. One thing that I do see come up with clients, and not only the company I'm at now, but in the past, is a lot of times clients will want everything in the kitchen sink. They want to be able to use it anywhere, but they're not really sure exactly how they're going to do that or if they even are going to do that. And that's one thing we really try and push back and have further conversations with our clients on, because it's the right of the talent and the influencer to push back and say, hey, if you want for use anywhere, you're going to need to pay a little bit more money for that. And I would agree. I would agree with that. And so what we're seeing is we're really trying to push back on our clients who ask for really everything to help map out with them where they could be using it so that we're not really wasting money. And that may not be the right way of saying it, but overpaying for use that we're not going to get. But the use really, I know that everyone's kind of had their eye on, and it's one that used to have a lot of question marks, but I think people are really, really understanding it these days as paid media. And, paid media, as we all kind of know, a single one-off organic post just doesn't typically drive the needle anymore like it used to. Back in 2012, 50 or 60% of a person's following would see organic posts. And now it's much lower than that. And, unfortunately, it's kind of a pay to play environment, but, it's just something we've evolved to. And we add that layer into our partnerships, from our client and the influencer perspective. But one thing, though, is to negotiate further paid media rights and deals typically adds a large price tag. And again, it's one of those things that I have to agree at a certain point with a talent influencer because, if we're extending the use of that content, throwing some dollars behind it, it's a different landscape than just, organically reposting on a client's owned and operated social. Furthermore, it kind of depends on where that paid is used. And, are they dark posts on Instagram only for 2 weeks versus throwing them on the display network for 6 months? So I think really driving down into what that looks like. But from our perspective, we're mostly securing paid media rights for just the digital channels is where we are seeing it happen with our clients. I'm not sure the industry itself, if they're doing more display or, those kind of fun things. But I know that paid can add a heavy amount of money to the influencer deals, but in some respects, it's absolutely worth it.
One of the things that I think is kind of a subtle point here, and I'm curious your thoughts, is that I've seen brands who want exclusivity for, let's say, 2 weeks or 30 days or something like that, but they want paid media rights for a year or 6 months or something like that. And it becomes a little challenging, I think, because let's say that the influencer partners with brand X and the exclusivity elapses and the brand is continuing to run paid units on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. And then let's say 3 months down the line or 4 months down the line, the influencer partners with brand Y, who is a competitor, and they start doing paid posts. We've seen situations like this where the new brand is like, hey, like I just got served an ad from this competitor. I thought, we have exclusivity now for you or something like that, right? So how do you navigate that? I mean, the way in which we've avoided that is just, if possible, tying the usage term to the exclusivity term to be the same, right?
Absolutely. And I think in those situations too, we look to the talent influencers we're hiring to know what deals they're in and how long those terms go out for. And I would say, when we're working with commercial endorsement agents, they know that stuff immediately. And we typically ask up front, are they locked into a category or what does the landscape look like for them? Are they locked down? And, what is in the pipeline? We end up asking those questions up front just to get it out of the way to make sure and see if the partnership's even going to work or not. But I fully agree with what you said. Those should be tied together. The term of which you're using those paid media assets would need to be tied to the exclusivity period and not linger on. And if it does linger on, I would recommend, locking the person in for exclusivity that extended period of time, which again could add a lot of dollars and cents. But we would never want to put our client in jeopardy of having a situation like that happen where, you're doubling up and you've got an organic post that's sponsored that's lining up with a dark post that you're getting served as well from a different client. So great question. And we would always really have to push back on the creator when we're getting into a deal with them to understand what their partnerships look like coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing is that we've seen clauses recently allowing brands to back out of influencer partnerships, like if the influencer does something crazy, But I've also started to see clauses that the influencers are requesting, especially larger ones, to back out if the brand gets embroiled in a controversy as well. I mean, I think it's a new era for brands in terms of like cancel culture and like social media campaigns to protest a brand or something like that. And so what do you make of that? I mean, is that something that your clients are amenable to, or how do they think through things like that?
Yeah, good question. So it's basically a reverse morals clause is what you call that. And our typical stance is we don't really have clients agree to that all too frequently. Certainly not because we don't want to be fair. I think it's a thing that, the clients that we work with as an agency, we don't take on clients that are going to be bad or have scandals. But yes, things do happen though. And so I think the biggest point is that, yes, we see people ask for reverse morals clause, but, in the spirit of partnership, it wouldn't look good for us to force somebody to continue posting sponsored content if the client is in hot water. So I think it's just more of a thing that we have to reason and have people understand that the content's not going to do well anyway. So, if you're going to force somebody to post for something that has a problem behind it, even if it was 3 or 4 months ago, typically there's going to be backlash. And so we have things built into the contract as far as, if we had to dissolve the partnership, there's certain monies that'll still be paid out. But it is a great point. Yes, we're seeing it come up, and it comes up a lot more in celebrity deals. Certainly something that's been around a lot of time. And I think a lot of that started even in sports deals years ago, but it is popping up in influencer deals, and we're calibrating accordingly.
Are there any deal points or clauses that you think are critical that most brands don't think about when working with an influencer?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of have a longer list, but I'll touch on them quickly. I think one thing that is not addressed, I know we do it, but I've seen that it's not addressed in other places, even simple insurances. People understanding who has enough insurance as far as when you're going to be on site, or do you have enough insurance to cover your contractual obligations to working together? Things like data protection. Data protection is a very large subject that kind of hit around May 2018. And then now it's becoming further and further more crucial. There's going to be a new law that's coming out in California in January. One thing we already touched on is the clarification of exclusivity. I think brands may not be really carving out the exclusivity they think that they need on paper well enough. You may think about it, but it also needs to be written on paper and exactly what you're looking for, and make sure your needs are exactly met. And furthermore, in the offer phase, when you're entering into a partnership with a talent, these kind of things need to be discussed up front. A lot of times people will try to rush through the deal and get to the contract, but often find that that's the worst thing you could do. And by the time you hit the contract, your deal that you thought was X amount of money is now double the amount because you didn't discuss certain things like, where is that content going to be used? What kind of exclusivity do you need? Those fun things. A couple other things. A lot of times we're not seeing clients use options in the contract. Some of our clients will say, we may want to add in this, or we may want to do paid media, but we're not sure yet. Negotiating the absolute use for paid media versus maybe using it is a huge dollar figure difference. And so we will take advantage of using the option to use paid media at a certain time, assuming we're mutually approved at X dollar figure at this type of use. And so we'll put that in there, but it's not the guaranteed sum. So that's something we do. And that goes into the option to extend the term, the option to extend exclusivity, the option to do another video, all those good fun things.
So negotiating those things ahead of time rather than coming back later.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps level the playing field, and then also reduces the paperwork on the tail end, because if you had to do a new agreement for some reason, going through another round of red lines is not usually the best use of time.
The other thing that I think that's interesting about that is that, let's say you bring all of the deal points to an influencer and say, okay, here's what the campaign's going to be. Here's the SOW, here's the terms, all that stuff. Any incremental things, if you come back even a day later or 6 hours later and say, oh, I forgot, we also want to include this. And they'll be like, oh, well, that's going to be, 50% more or something.
You've lost your leverage.
Yeah, you've lost your I don't know if you've found that to be the case, but we have always found to be the most critical point in a negotiation with influencers. I don't know what it is, but it's the nature of this space, is that anything beyond the initial ask seems to be people just treat it as oh my gosh, I can't believe you're asking me for all these additional things.
Absolutely. So what we do from our side, and it sometimes takes a lot longer than you would expect, is we have basically a formal offer deal sheet that is not a contract, but it's basically, think of it as a letter of intent to be bound together. And it outlines everything that you would expect, the juicy points in a contract. So exclusivity, ownership, paid media usage, how many videos, all those things. And so the key here, though, is that the account team that works with the clients, make sure that they have visibility into that, and make sure that they know that we don't make an offer until everyone's aligned on where this is going and all the deal points have been put into that agreement. And we basically stall the process until that happens. Because to your point, coming back 2 days later and asking for an extra anything is never the best option.
Right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about talent identification. I mean, there's so many software tools out there right now that allow brands and agencies to be kind of like 100% quantitative, right? Like they find, you can find influencers in a certain DMA or a certain audience demo or certain like affinities. And, I think influencer marketing has always been kind of an art and a science. And so I'm curious, like, do you think that that's going to change if everyone kind of doubles down on software? How does Edelman approach the talent discovery process?
So, yeah, it's a great question because at the end of the day, how we do a good job for our clients is casting the right set of talent and influencers to tell the stories and tell that story to drive an action. And to do that, you have to identify the right people for that. And, you alluded to this earlier, which is, a lot of people who have made being an influencer their business, they tend to take on maybe too many partnerships sometimes. And maybe the feed becomes saturated and the stories aren't actually coming through. So most of the time that we spend before we even start making those formal offers, like we were discussing, is really spent identifying talent. And it's 50% of the equation, I think is what I would say with all of the technology out there. It keeps getting better and it keeps getting better. I mean, I'm sure you were familiar, the early days, it was a pretty database is what it was. It was a way to say, I've got 5 million creators in my database and I can sort by travel and it'll just spit me a list out and it shows their numbers. And now we've gone further to here's the audience demographics, whether it be pulled from first party data because they're authenticated or whether it be from a great third party source. Those insights truly help out 50% of how we hire somebody. If we know that we're hitting a region in, let's just say New York City, for instance, and we have new stores opening up, if we have 75 or more percent of a person's audience in LA, we're going to avoid that. And so those pieces of data have made us smarter in the way that we actually identify talent. But I still think that there is never going to be a way that you can fully automate the talent and influencer business through any sort of technology solution. I think part of it you can, maybe a nano deal or a micro deal, you may be able to, but the missing 50% is the relationship side of the business. And it is that white glove approach that's still necessary. It's the creative discussions that you have with basically the talent themselves that we're having with our clients. Those pieces of discussions and those phone calls and figuring out what works best on talent's channels is the way that we make content pop. And I think it's helped us be smarter. It's helped us save time as far as identifying a core set of people. But from there, we're still doing the legwork to try and understand why they would be good, having those initial conversations and really finding the right people for our clients.
I think one of the differences with influencer marketing versus other advertising channels is that influencers are people, right? I mean, I think that it's not programmatic, right? Like these are people, these are stories that they're telling. They have a very unique connection with their audience. If you have two influencers who both have 500,000 followers, you may get wildly different performance. The CPM that you're going to get in terms of the impressions may be totally different. So do you think your clients and you think brands out there get that now? Or is that still sometimes, something that you need to educate?
I think we see it both ways. The ones that have had successful campaigns in the past where they have truly kind of let go, for lack of better terms, and said, hey, creator, here's a sandbox I want you to play in. I want you to make this your own and we'll approve it, of course, and then you create that content and post it. I think those brands have seen the true power of it. They truly don't see it as an item to tick off like a paid media buy, for instance. And so we see better creative. We see more of that human side of this business, of marketing products. And it's exciting. It's exciting when you kind of give the reins to creators, again, within that sandbox, because then the actual fans of the creators can tell that it's more of an authentic story. And authenticity is where we see this business heading. And it's definitely one of the things in 2020 that it's going to continue to be a very heavy point that I know marketers and even influencers are going to be kind of putting out there. But we also have clients that still will think that maybe we only hire influencers to generate for a new product launch. And sometimes it could end up being a little more transactional. But what we do is we usually hit pause on that and we tell them that we still need to create that story behind it. And we still need to make sure that it's not coming off as just, single one-off posts and hit a couple different approaches to make sure that fans and audiences are actually viewing.
It is a balance, right? Because on the one hand, the brands who allow for the creative freedom, like you're going to get a better product, right? Like they know what their audience is going to respond to. But at the same time, especially if you're trying to get more mileage out of the asset, if you want to like repurpose it for paid media and things like that, there are certain like little sound bites or key messages that you need to be able to get to be able to have it repurposable. And so I think there is kind of a delicate balance there. And I think there are a lot of great creators out there who understand that, but then certain ones also would do better to understand that, you're entering into a business partnership with a brand. And there's certain like baseline requirements in terms of what the content should look and feel like.
Yeah. And what we do in those kind of scenarios, when we'll close a deal and let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say we're making them do a YouTube video, minimum of 10 minutes in their own voice. We work on concepts together. We understand their interests, what could work. We do all that side of the business. But what we'll also do is we are going to run paid cut downs. Well, we'll have a specific set of instructions and we'll negotiate that up front in the deal that we're going to say, hey, within the same deal, we're going to do a couple different cut downs. And from that, we're going to do different directions for things they may need to say. And so we will approach that up front to make sure that the creator understands that we have kind of a balance. We've got the organic side, and then we also have the touch point with paid. And we find that works really well, just so we're getting our needs communicated up front before we're closing the deal and coming back later and asking for different cut downs and all those kind of things.
So I wanted to shift gears, talk a little bit about brand safety, right? Like obviously there's been a couple different, brand safety crises that we've seen with some of the major social platforms over the last couple of years. YouTube in particular comes to mind, where a major advertiser will have their ad run against something hyper political, something like that. What types of safeguards do you use for your clients, specifically with respect to influencer marketing? I think programmatic is a little bit of a different animal. There's software tools out there that can try and prevent things like that, whitelists and things like that. But do you have different strategies for preventative brand safety, but also like crisis management tactics? What's the playbook that you use to counsel your clients?
We've got a couple different things. I mean, it really depends on the industry itself. So let's say if we're working in pharma, there's a different set of rules and regulations that we have to go behind to make sure that the messages go by regulatory compliance and things that we're saying, even the full structure of the content, and then also the responses that fans may have, how we're allowed to respond back to that. But shifting back towards identification, even when we are looking for talent to actually extend offers to, or talent at least to put in front of our clients for approval, not only, yes, do we use those technologies. I mean, there's even another technology we use that does a background check, for lack of better terms, and it'll run very specific words against content, and it'll go obviously backwards, and you can pick the amount of years that you want to go back, and it'll shoot you back flags of things that may have come up in the past. So we have stuff like that. We've got things as standard as Google searches. I mean, that still exists as far as, making sure that we truly are putting forth the right person to our client. But as far as preventative measures, again, very much dependent on the type of industry we're in. But we really like to make sure that, not only do we give a briefing book to influencers or talent to make sure they understand what they're signing up to, and when they do sign up, what exactly we're looking for when they create that first round of content. But we also do messaging. A lot of times we'll have messaging phone calls to make sure that we have the right sort of either words or any sort of messages, whether it be product attributes or anything that may not come out correctly, to make sure and address that with a talent or an influencer before they go live. Could be an SMT, could be just a YouTube video. And then from there, after an influencer goes live, we usually have this built into the contract that they are around to respond to fans for a certain specific period of time. And then any answer or any questions that go out of the realm of kind of being a comfortable answer, if they want to answer it, we have somebody from our side that's like an account manager that can help craft those responses to ensure that we're responding in a light that's answering questions and being positive at the same time, just to make sure that things aren't going off topic and things can very easily, quickly go to a place that they don't need to be on the internet.
Obviously, there will always be a minority of commenters who are very vocal about, you're a sellout, or I can't believe you partnered with this brand. But I think that there is something to be said about keeping all of the comments up so that it doesn't feel like heavily sterilized. But do you still have clients that just want to delete everything, delete all the comments, keep everything positive? Honestly, I see pros and cons to both approaches. So it's not like one is right and one is wrong. I'm just curious, like the appetite of your clients to handle comment sections like that.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. It's really, really client specific and then industry specific. If it goes medical or if it goes, pharmaceutical, then we really have to control the comments. There's no question about it. We have to control it. And sometimes we can't even allow comments at all. So there's that side of it. And then the other side of it, which is, call it a technology brand or a fashion brand. Some clients more than others will want to be involved and they themselves sometimes want to jump in and start responding on influencers' posts. We don't necessarily encourage it, but we also don't discourage it. And if they do want to jump in and start having those conversations, we again ask them to work with us on messaging. And we have experts, of course, at a PR company that can help craft those messages to make sure that what is being said is being taken the right way. People can tend to take things ways that were never supposed to be in a way that it comes off. So we work together with them on that. But one thing that is interesting is that, yes, we've started to see clients that are trying to jump in on the influencers post and also get their word out there. But if it's overbearing, it tends to go very negatively. So we advise them on kind of scaling back as much as they can. But again, case by case.
It's a complicated time to be a brand. For example, the expectation of a consumer, they think that if they tag a brand on Twitter, that they'll get a much quicker response time than like calling in their 800 number or something, right? If they want to complain about something, there's like this expectation that consumers have about how a brand is supposed to behave and how prompt they're supposed to be on social media. And yet there's this fine line, like you mentioned, where if you work with an influencer and the brand kind of jumps in, you don't want it to be too heavy handed. So it's very much a balance. And I feel for brands in this day and age because I feel like the right way to behave changes on a weekly basis, it seems like.
It really does. And I think a lot of it's excitement based too. By the time you've talked about a campaign, we have it finished on paper. We finally did the paperwork with talent and influencers, got those deals closed. You get through the content creation process. And once it goes live, a lot of brands are just excited. They have social media people that work in-house that want to be able to interact with fans. And so again, it's not that we fully discourage it at all, but it's one of those things that we want to make sure that they're armed with the right tone. So obviously within their own tone that they would speak on their own socials, but making sure that the messages come off correct, that they line up with basically even an influencer's persona. It's all really calibrated towards each campaign, but it's a great question though.
Obviously, we have a lot of like brand marketers who listen to the podcast. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on like, do you have a certain playbook or structure or way in which you counsel new brands and new clients on doing influencer marketing? Because there's still a lot out there that really haven't done much, with respect to working with digital first creators. And so do you suggest that they activate on a certain platform first to kind of dip their toes in the water, or like kind of what are the types of KPIs that you're encouraging your clients to track these days? So I'm just kind of curious if you could speak to that.
Sure. I don't mean to sound like a broken record here, but we typically try and, even if it's their first avenue into influencer marketing, we really hit pause and say, what are your KPIs? And so it's KPI driven. And even if your KPI may be just to increase awareness, we still push to even go further down. Awareness is still very much needed as far as a lot of campaigns, but we like to drive actions. And so really the KPIs that we're encouraging is to drive an action of some sort and an action that we can track. And, that could be something as simple as, do we want swipe ups on Instagram story posts? That is a metric. Do we want that plus paid media ads to know what were the clicks and then how was the amount of time that people actually click through from the landing page they were on? Things of that sort. In-store foot traffic. We have a lot of like fashion retailers that we represent, and we hire a lot of regional influencers, and we want to measure what is that impact of actually getting people into the stores. And so I think really the actual playbook we use to introduce clients into influencer marketing is really based off of what sort of need that we can help them meet. And then from there, understand what sort of talent is going to work the best for them. And Instagram is such a heavy platform these days. Most people are on Instagram. a lot of people are activating sponsored posts on Instagram. So Instagram's a natural platform that we would recommend, but maybe it makes sense to do a longer form YouTube video because it's reviewing one of the products. And then we're also posting on Instagram, hitting it with paid media, and then doing a grand opening at a store. So style and outfit, cut down on Instagram with paid media, and then also doing an event in the store and bringing people in. And so those are the kind of ways that we'd like to counsel our clients versus just one-off kind of posts that aren't really around anymore, or if they are, I don't really recommend them being the only part of the toolbox per se for influencer marketing.
Well, kind of to wrap up here, what do you think is next for the future of influencer marketing?
We're working on a digital trends report that we put out every year, and I'll give you kind of 3 things that we're working on. We've got a few other that we're going to be putting that out, and definitely we'll share that with you guys when we get it there later this year. But one of the things I touched on earlier was authenticity, transparency, kind of the whole fake follower thing as well. There's so much of this going on right now. There's so much noise within the business. There's an exponential amount of new influencers. And as a result of that, what we're starting to see is that even the types of content that's coming out and the type of people that we're looking to hire, it's going to fall in a bucket of just this entire movement towards being more authentic, again, transparent, and really making sure that if we are hiring a talented influencer, that the fans that are going to be consuming the story from our clients are actually real people. So that's kind of one thing that we know that we're going to see. And then a second thing that we've been noticing is that influencers and talent, and you had even brought this up earlier, are casting a wider net into different content mediums. And so we're seeing people experiment with more live streaming services like a Twitch, for instance, or a Mixer. We're seeing podcasts. We're seeing people experimenting with TikTok. And I think a lot of this is boiling down to there's video and live content is taking precedence with the type of content that's being put out there these days. And a photo only is very easy to get lost. So only photos. And so curated video content is what's really capturing attention. And YouTubers have always had, and even people like yourself, you guys have always had a leg up on that because you're able to create that content and engage that audience. So in general, though, we see that there's going to be influencers experimenting with different sorts of mediums than their own platform they're on existing now, or maybe their main one that they came up on. And then a third thing that we see that's not necessarily a fun topic, but it's an important one, data privacy and compliance considerations. So we think that that is going to be a continued thing on people's minds. It has for us throughout 2019, but I think in general, the industry is going to adopt a kind of a deeper focus and understanding that we really need to be careful about how our data is being sent back and forth. If fans are responding and we're passing information to people, are we making sure that things are protected and making sure that we're not, abusing any laws, regulations, and things of that sort?
Absolutely. That was super powerful, super interesting. And I think you're right. I think those 3 things, especially the data privacy thing, is going to become, for brands, especially those who have tried to implement GDPR things, this California law. I think we're going to start seeing other states adopt them. So any brand doing business in California, it's going to have a lot of repercussions, I think.
Yeah, it will.
Thank you so much, Andrew. This was really fun. Thank you so much for joining me. How can people find you? How can they contact you?
LinkedIn would be best. Please add me, send me a message. I'm always happy to meet new people, and I love coming out and doing things like this.
Fantastic. You've just listened to the Sponsored Post podcast with your host, Justin Moore. You can subscribe to hear more great interviews and episodes via Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Trending Family, you can visit www.trendingfamily.com. See you next time.